So we're not going to do our usual who's too high, who's too low. We're just going to go back and compare it to week 1. And who was Pete too high on, who was Pete too low on, and who did Pete get just right. Week 1, the top 10, to refresh your memory, in case you don't have that active in your mind right now. Kansas City Chiefs were at 1. Green Bay Packers at number 2. Pete. 49ers at 3. 4 Bills. Sorry to do it.
Okay.
5 Bengals. 6 Ravens. 7 Lions. 8 Texans. Oh man,
Jets.
I was high on the Texans too. 9 Jets. 10
The
Cowboys.
Jets.
It's a tough game. Tough game to predict. Bottom 5. Here's a fun one. 28 Broncos. 29 Giants. 30 Pats. 31 Raiders. 32 Panthers. Bryce Young saved them.
This league.
So that would mean the team that dropped the most, who Pete was too high on, the Jacksonville Jaguars were the team you were too high on, surprisingly, because you're usually like the doom and gloom Jags guy.
Like the realistic Rodgers.
Jags fan. They went from number 12 to 28 in your power rankings. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence injury, a big part of that. Jets went from 9 to 26.
Jeez.
Browns went from 16 to 29. I feel like 16 was low on the Browns to begin with, though. I don't think a lot of people had them at 16, so there's really no shame in where you had them at the start of the season.
Good roster.
So
the ones Jacksonville, I thought I thought the division would be tight. I didn't think the division would be as bad as it was. The injury factored in, and I thought they would be a wild card team. They wouldn't win a division. I thought the Texans would. One would win it with 10 wins. One would be a wild card with 9. It didn't work out that way. Disappointing there. The 49ers, I'm going to take a little asterisk next to that. Can't predict those injuries. I mean, where would they be if
everything that happened there?
So, and the Packers, look, I still think the Packers are a good team. The Watson-Alexander injuries bother me a little bit, but I still think look at the games they lost. I mean, they could have easily won every single one of them. We're sitting here raving about the Lions and the Vikings.
Caleb Williams could have swept them if not for a blocked field goal, but we're not talking about.
Well, you can do that. You can do that. Yeah, you're
swept.
Right.
Swept.
They also
the last game of the year,
Bears benched their starters in week 18.
Yeah. So I just think when you look at it from that standpoint, I'm still bullish on the Packers. I think the Packers have an identity problem. What are you? What are you in offense?
Are you a power run team, or are you a throw it all over the yard team?
Or do you allow him to throw it early, or do you allow him to play the run game? And then when he starts throwing it around, he looks good, but by that time you're behind. I think they have an identity problem.
I can't feel his hand right now.
If I would one thing that I think was the biggest that people over-exaggerated, it was their wide receiving core. I don't think it was that good this year. I think they were fine. I don't think they're a bad wide receiving core by any means, but there's no guy I trust to beat a top 15 corner in the NFL in man coverage. They don't have a single guy who I would be like, yeah, if we got to have it, I'm going to go to him.
Well, if Watson's healthy, if you lined up man to man, he can go by you.
He's fat. He's a big play guy, but he is
we need every play
one-trick pony, right?
Yeah,
he's nowhere near a complete wide receiver.
Correct.
He's like a souped-up Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Correct.
I think there's 2 ways of looking at the Packers at the beginning of the year. Like, people have often said talent is a 4-letter word. You know what I'm saying? If you got talent, that means you haven't developed it into skill. And I think that with the youth in that room and the talent that they had, people put them on a pedestal, like you're saying. But guys like myself, there's a lot of promise in Green Bay because we know what Jordan Love's capable of when he gets hot. But we needed to see them take the next step. And I think that was one of my burning questions at the beginning of the year. Is this young receiving core going to rest on their laurels from the success they had last year, or were they going to take the next step? And they didn't take the next step. And now they finished with Christian Watson with an ACL and questions about their identity on offense. And it's kind of like we're back at square one here with this group.
Well, to your point about the wide receivers, if he's not there, who scares anybody down the field? Does anybody scare?
Speed. They don't have.
They got to scheme stuff up.
They better just block guys up and run the.
They got to scheme stuff.
Reed's your best deep threat. Then after that,
I love that guy.
Is slow. Dobbs is like not that scary as a vertical threat.
But they haven't had the other tight end all year.
Musgrave's back. And
right.
That's actually interesting because he's probably their fastest guy now. If you talk about top speed,
right?
He's probably their fastest.
That's the guy I thought was gonna have a breakout year.
By the way, we're talking about them like they're dead. They ain't dead.
No. Yeah. For sure.
Let's not bury them.
They're not dead, but they will get beat. in the first round.
Maybe you got a quarterback who's coming off concussion and he's a little rusty.
Don't let Tanner McKee out that moment. You know what I mean? Don't let him out there.
Oh God, look at you! Two games, and you're on the bandwagon.
2 weeks ago, I was saying I think I interviewed him for a CPA position, but now I'm like, hey, Tanner McKee.
Oh man, he really does have big CPA vibes. All right, Jets though, I want to just touch on them for a second because they went from 9 to 26, and they didn't have. I mean, the Jags quarterback got hurt, the Browns quarterback got hurt. Jets didn't have a quarterback injury. They didn't have really that many big injuries that impact this roster. They just sucked from the start to finish. And to me, they're not 26 if Robert Saleh doesn't get fired.
Yes.
That season goes much, much differently. But they never were good. It just their offense with Nathaniel Hackett and what they had in that playbook was not ready to compete with the rest of the NFL. They just weren't.
Well, not only that, the supposedly improved offensive line wasn't an improved offensive line, and so that led to a lot of the problems.
Well, you don't have creativity offensively. It doesn't help anybody, including the 40-year-old tackle and the. But
none of those guys played that. I mean, the center plays high. He got better as the season went on, but he plays high. The right tackle's 140. I mean,
he's my age. That's
honestly the best they looked was when.
If you're 140, I'm 190. But I mean,
he's 140.
But and where's the tight end threat? There is none. I mean, they didn't. We probably over analyzed the offensive line, thinking it would be that much better, and they would be that. Breece Hall, what did he do?
Yeah. Well, but you shouldn't realistically need a great offensive line if the passing game was.
If it's schemed up properly. Yes. It is like watching Dancing with the Stars. Everything's in rhythm. Everything's on time. Everybody's beautiful. The lights are bright. Things are happening. You watch the Detroit Lions. Granted, they have a great offensive line, but I feel like even if they had some of their swing guys in there, Ben Johnson would be able to scheme things up to have things happening in rhythm, to make Jared Goff look comfortable, to protect the tackles. You watch a team like Chicago, who's got some pretty good offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. And they don't have the answers offensively from a creative standpoint, and they're in a bind week after week after week.
Well, that Rodgers offense, he wants 2 over here and 1 over here, and he wants them not moving, and he wants them lined up, and away they go. And it's just you can't play that way anymore.
One of my favorite things that Ben Johnson does, Matt LaFleur does, that Jets didn't do, is that even if they have good offensive lines, those are probably top 5 O-lines in the NFL, they still give their offensive lines help on passing downs. They are still chipping. They are still having 6 guys, 7 guys, max pros. They are still doing all they can to give even more time to your quarterback. That to me is the downfall of so many offenses around the NFL, is insisting on going 5 out when you don't have the guys to do it up front and just not providing your O-line help. It's very easy.
You're right. 5 out, 5 out, you need good offensive line. But another infuriating thing to me is these teams that do 2 out and max protect.
Yeah, there's difference like.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be in between that. Yes. Nothing worse, and that as an offensive lineman. Eventually, 5-0. Eventually, when you have max protect. Eventually,
you got to block for 12 seconds.
Eventually, somebody's coming free.
You got to block for 12 seconds.
There's 7 guys back there, against 2 receivers.
Unless you've got a Tyreek Hill who's taking the top off the defense, or a Christian Watson, or somebody like that. But outside of that, you better hope you got the quarterback making the right decision or the check down every play.
And by the way, back to the Jets, Rodgers didn't play well for a month, at least 4 or 5 weeks of that season. He looked like he was still bothered by the leg. He's starting to play better. I mean, whether he comes back, who knows? But if he doesn't,
I'd love to see him back.
What do they have?
I want to see him
me
back.
Too. Yeah. What do they have? What's your option?
Well, we talked about this yesterday. I wish you were on the conversations with us every week, so we didn't have to tell you about what we talked about. But Matt Ryan was on there, and him and I have had many conversations in the back hallway at CBS where it's like, do you think we just wrote off Aaron Rodgers too early and we gave the benefit of the doubt to all these skill players coming back? You need a year to get your explosion back, get your feet back under you. We judged Aaron Rodgers in the first half of the season. Shoot, I was on this show saying he was, dead, checked out, over the hill. But he doesn't look that way. I mean, he looks like he can play quarterback in the National Football League next year.
And you don't have other options. I mean, where they're drafting, what are their options going to be? And free agent pool, you want Russell Wilson over Aaron Rodgers? I don't.
I'd like to see him somewhere else.
Who? Aaron?
Mm-hmm.
Where would you, where?
San Francisco.
That's not going to
happen. That ain't happening.
It'd be fun.
But okay.
It would be fun.
Aaron Rodgers
Hey, it'd
if
be
you're
fun
Aaron
as
Rodgers,
hell.
you don't want to be with the Raiders.
No.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like if you need I mean, the Browns are like the only team where it could even like change them around. Who are
If
like
he
the
thinks this
quarterback
year was
needy
depressing
teams
in
where
New
you think it
York,
could really
wait
turn
till they
quickly.
win 4 games
Yeah,
in
like-
Cleveland.
And Tennessee's going to draft one. So
Tennessee would be fun.
where are the options for him?
San Francisco.
Yeah, I
They
don't
can get out of Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, would you do that for 1 year?
Kyle, if I'm Aaron Rodgers and
No, not Aaron Rodgers.
if I'm
If you're the
Aaron Rodgers
49ers.
and the complaint all year has been that our offense is too vanilla, yada yada yada, we're stuck in the mud, we're not in the modern day. You know who is? Kyle Shanahan.
It'd be interesting.
Aaron
They're not
Rodgers
gonna
has
do it.
wanted to play in the Bay Area his entire life.
I get it, but what do you do with Purdy?
Trade him.
Somebody will pay.
Well, that means you're only basically getting a 1 year fix on your quarterback
Great.
position.
But they're, I mean,
Maybe
they got
two.
Brock Purdy and they could draft one. I don't know. It's
Because they did
it's
such a great
far-fetched.
job drafting.
It's
Trey
far-fetched,
Lance.
but that's
But
what
I am of the opinion that they're not going to back up the Brinks truck for Brock Purdy.
Mhm.
I
Or
don't
Sam
think they
Darnold.
go 50+ million. I just
No.
don't think they do.
No, and I don't think Sam Darnold's getting that money. What if Sam Darnold goes one and done this week?
If you're Brock Purdy,
He has
though,
a lot
are you saying like I'm in
There's a
such
lot on the line. Speaking of, let's get to that. Teams that rose the most. Vikings. They rose from 25 to 6.
I wasn't a believer in the quarterback situation, so
Hey.
fault on me.
Shouldn't no, not a lot of people were. Let's
the
be
best worst thing that happened was the JJ McCarthy meniscus. It took away a quarterback controversy. It gave them an unquestioned leader in the locker room. It allowed JJ McCarthy to stand by and develop from a mental standpoint, get to witness the game firsthand.
So what happens now?
Sam Darnold, if he's smart, and I think he is smart, will take less than elite money to stay in a situation like Minnesota because he's got the best of both worlds.
What does he take? The Baker Mayfield plus inflation contract?
Yeah,
probably.
Will the Vikings give him the Baker Mayfield plus
That's the
incentive?
big
depends on how he does in the playoffs.
Okay, if he gets the Baker Mayfield plus incentive contract, what do you trade JJ McCarthy then?
Yeah, to the Raiders.
Like we've been saying.
The Vikings are in an
Aaron
interesting
Rodgers
spot
to the Niners.
because they've built one. They traded a lot of draft picks away last year.
Right.
Two, they
have
haven't drafted spectacularly well in the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah era. They've built a lot of that team. I mean, just think about the
Free
impact
agency.
players. It's all built through free agency. So to do that, to keep that kind of team, can't pay your quarterback a ton of money to keep a free agency laden roster. So, I mean, just from a pure cap sense situation, and from talking to Matthew Collar, who Vikings insider, who was at all the training camps and just saw them both in training camp, he thought McCarthy was the better one in training camp. And now Darnold, obviously, like uber talented. What he's done already is like bird in the hand versus, two in the bush sort of thing. But to see a guy that good that early on as a rookie, I think they end up riding with McCarthy at this point.
I don't love McCarthy. I never did.
I don't either.
Darnold's for the
surprising
streets.
to me.
Darnold
But-
for the streets.
But if you really want to shoot for the moon and go for a Super Bowl, because with Darnold, you'll probably make the playoffs the next few years if you do sign him to the 3 or whatever. But if you really want to go for a Super Bowl, big play, getting the super cheap rookie deal quarterback is your way to do that. And if Darnold goes elsewhere, you get a 3rd-round compensatory back. You need the picks.
See, I think what showed up the other day
I like that.
was
Yeah.
the difference between the two offensive lines showed up in the Lions game. Darnold was getting pressured. Even when he, and
Yes, the interior of that O-line's
And
still bad.
what I think I heard you bitching about was the fact that the Minnesota Vikings changed their stripes in that game and the Detroit Lions didn't.
Yeah.
The Minnesota Vikings went for it in 4th down,
Right.
goal to go situations.
Kick the field goal.
And the Lions continued to do that.
Right.
Be yourself, right? Nobody's youer than you. And I think Dan Campbell and the Lions understand that. And the Vikings, while we're all kind of sold on this year's Vikings, they're still trying to figure out who the hell they are.
They panicked.
When
And
rubber
not only
meets the
that,
road.
They didn't in that game. They also weren't true to who they were as an offense early in that game. And I think they got away from who they were.
Take your points.
Yeah, damn right. And get the ball down the field early in that game.
Yeah.
They didn't try to.
All right, other teams that rose the most. Common theme here. Commanders go from 26 to 7. Broncos go from 28 to 12. And the Panthers go from 32 to 20. Young quarterback that plays better than everyone expected. to play.
Yeah.
That's how you.
Are
That's
we
why.
all
That's
in
why
on-
everyone says quarterback position's
Are
valuable.
we all in on Bryce Young now?
Yeah.
Yes.
You are?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I got to see more of it, but he's significantly better since he came back.
The game
He's
against the
playing like he
Falcons
sees the
was-
fastball. He's playing like he can see the fastball.
Well, the Falcons are terrible at defense.
Falcons terrible. They still have a good secondary, and he was. I'm not not to say that number 1 overall pick he's going to meet expectations of being, a stud, but he is undoubtedly a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. A top 20 quarterback in the NFL is like, you're there. I at this point in time,
So
with how much.
So he's Baker? No.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I think.
You think he can be as good as Baker?
I think he's
Baker
better than Kyler
adjacent?
Murray right now. Or like, I think he's already shown more than
I got to
Kyler
see.
Murray.
The sample size is small. The teams haven't been. I mean, when he played the Eagles, he was okay against the Eagles on the road in that game. I mean,
He had a game-winning drive that Xavier Legette blew.
But it's just okay.
He had a game-winning drive against the Panthers as well. That Chuba Hubbard fumbled
His own team,
or the Buccaneers.
Bucks.
There, okay, yeah. He was.
And they're
All
not
right.
It's week 18. I still haven't slapped him. We're doing good.
Teams that Pete nailed. Your Goldilocks teams. You had the Chiefs at 1 preseason, 1 now.
There you go.
Nailed that one. Not worried about the 38-0 loss though against the Broncos. That's big heading into the postseason.
Head scratcher.
Who were those guys on the field?
You and Mike are like, I didn't recognize any of these guys.
They called guys up in the practice squad and
They
played.
did. They let the equipment staff in there.
It's crazy.
You had the Ravens at 6 preseason, 5 now. Just about nailed that one. You had the who else did you nail? Were those the only 2? Oh no, that you were really like spot on.
Buffalo's pretty close.
Buffalo. Yeah, Buffalo was the last one there. Buffalo from 4 to 2.
And I was bullish on Buffalo more than most people.
I was not.
Yeah, most people thought the window was closed.
I was bearish.
I was bearish as well. Yeah, I was thinking they were going to be around 12 this year. I thought that was.
I love that team.
I made a list of 8 Super Bowl contenders and left the Buffalo Bills off, and I got killed for it. And I was like, okay, we'll see. And now I'm an idiot.
And they are a contender.
Yep.